What's up, guys? How are you? It is Adam Balsinger coming back to you again with another video from the Investor Boardroom. Now, these videos, our intent is to inform, to educate, and hopefully to entertain a little bit, with the ultimate goal of helping you get one step closer to financial freedom. We have shared in a lot of our videos about our way of choosing geographies, right? How do we decide that we're going to invest in that certain area, or how do we decide not to invest in a certain area? And I've talked in previous videos about certain data points that we're looking for, certain criteria that we're looking for, but I want to talk about another component today of how we decide to zero in and invest in a certain area or not. And that revolves around the tenant landlord laws within that state or that city. Okay, so some areas will tend to, in the instance of some form of dispute, some places will lean kind of by default on the side of the tenant, and others will lean on the side of the landlord. Now, when we're choosing how to invest, what we've realized over years of doing this is that the distinction between those two, a lot of times they follow party lines. This isn't meant to be political, but generally speaking, your more tenant-friendly locations are left-leaning, they're Democrat. Your more conservative, Republican, right-leaning areas wind up being more landlord-friendly, okay? And the reason that the tenant or landlord friendliness really factors in is ultimately kind of twofold, okay? So first and foremost, we're talking about when evictions or ejectments wind up popping up, okay? So an eviction, you have a tenant that is living in the property that is no longer paying according to the lease, okay? So you have somebody that is living in the property on a mutually agreed upon lease that is no longer honoring the terms of the lease. That is an eviction. Evictions have to be handled in court, and depending on where you are, the eviction process can be relatively short and relatively easy, or the eviction process in a in a tenant-friendly state, sorry about that, could be a lot longer and a lot more difficult, okay? Now, the reason that this becomes relevant, if I have a non-paying tenant, I want to remove that person from the property as soon as humanly possible. Okay, now look, I'm assuming that we as a team have already tried to work with this individual. Our objective at properties is not to kick people out and be a dick and rule with an iron fist, right? The objective is to work with the people who are living at your property, but the reality is that sometimes we just need to move on, right? That person is not in a position where things are going to be remedied anytime soon, and we have a business to run and we have investors that we need to answer to, right? So we need to get that non-paying person out of the property and get somebody in that's going to be paying. Well, if I'm in an area where I can get that non-payer out in a month or two and get a paying tenant moved back in, what that means is that that unit is generating a return for me and for my investors quicker. Versus in a tenant-friendly area, it could take 6 months for me to get that person removed from the property. And so it's just more time that I own this property and that I have a unit that is not generating me income. That's a problem, right? Now, we can also take this a step further. if it's a longer process, I have to go to court more often in order to be able to get a non-paying tenant evicted from the property. So if I have to go to court more frequently, that means my attorney's costs are increasing, right? So the longer it takes, I'm probably paying out more in legal fees. And now here's another component. If I have a tenant that's pissed off at me because we're going to court and I'm trying to get him evicted from the property, and they are able to stay there for longer and longer periods of time, I am simply increasing the likelihood that that person is going to intentionally cause some additional damage to the unit just out of spite. So if I can be in a landlord-friendly area where I can get that non-payer out quickly, right? Number one, I can get a paying tenant in faster, but I'm also looking at lower legal costs, and it's also a less likely chance that that person has time to really beat the hell out of the unit, right? We've had to evict tenants before, and we've gone in, they've punched holes in the walls, they've ripped plumbing out. Like, people can be really, really, they just act really badly in some of those instances. Now, there are also ejectments. So in an ejectment, you have a squatter situation. So this is somebody that is illegally living in the property without your permission. Believe it or not, in some areas, it is harder to get a squatter removed from the property than it is to get a non-paying tenant removed from the property. Does that even make sense? They're illegally living there, right? You should be able to call the police and get them taken out right away. But in some areas, there's something known as squatters' rights, and you could be looking at 12 months to get somebody removed that should have never even been there in the first place, okay? So your ability to remove somebody that shouldn't be at the property is one big thing that we are constantly aware of when we're thinking about landlord-tenant laws and choosing the right location to invest. The other are potential caps that an area could put on rent increases. So look, I'm a value-add multifamily buyer, right? So what I'm trying to do when I acquire a property is I'm looking to identify a property with below market rents that I can increase the rent, and that's how I'm able to add value and give the awesome returns to our investors that we're able to provide, right? So if I'm buying in an area that has limitations on the percent that I can increase rent every time I'm signing a new lease, now it just makes it harder for me to be able to find a good deal and to be able to execute on the business plan to generate the returns that we need to generate for our investors. So if there are rent caps, a lot of times these caps are based off of either A, the average income of the area, so you can only charge a certain percentage. Typically, it's like 40 to 60 or 40 to 80% or something like that. They'll give you a range. You can only charge a certain amount per month based off the average median income. In other areas, what some of those rent limitations are for rent increases is based off of a percentage. So you may be only to increase the rent from one year to another, say 3% or 5%, right? It's always going to be different based on the location. But those two reasons, right? The ease or difficulty of getting a uncooperative, non-paying, or squatter out of the property, as well as then our ability to increase rents the way that we see fit in order to have the property perform at its optimal level. Those are things that we're looking very, very closely at before we're thinking about investing into a specific area. When we get some of those really kind of tenant-friendly spaces, we completely avoid them like the plague. You will not catch me anytime in the near future investing in New Jersey, New York, Chicago, Seattle, California, right? Like, these places are so far leaning on the tenant friendliness that it's very difficult to be able to, in my opinion, make money in those areas without taking on a lot of unnecessary risk. So when you're looking out there and when you are looking at investing, we're always looking to minimize that risk. We're always being conscious of our risk return, right? So I hope you learned a lot from today's video. Go ahead and like today's video if you did. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything from us in the future. And I hope that you, after today, are one step closer to that ultimate goal of financial freedom. Take care.